It's been raining very heavily over the last few days. Rather, the rain switches back and forth. So you might be able to hear that in the background. But I wanted to discuss the Mueller probe because, according to Acting Attorney General Whitaker, he said this late last month, I think it was like the 28th or 29th, it's near completion. And with it being near completion, I'm starting to think that the investigation's not going to turn out the way a lot of people want it to. So if you're a liberal, for example, or a Democrat, odds are you wanted to prove that Trump was involved with colluding with Russia, that he played a part in just completely making the election go his way. And I always said to these people that if you think he's so stupid, which is a running thing that they like to do, oh, he's so dumb, ha ha ha. Do you really believe he would have been able to mastermind a conspiracy as treacherous as rigging the elections in his own country? And a good chunk of them will actually say yes. Apparently he has two levels of intelligence. But when I watched a lot of the things that have happened in the last 2 years relating to the U.S. and Russia, so during Trump's tenure, whether it's pulling out of the INF treaty, whether it's the administration, for example, being in favor of a coup in Venezuela, whereas Russia's opposed to taking action over there. I did a whole separate recording about the INF withdrawal and what that means and how it's finicky. But the bottom line is that when I watch these kinds of activities with both sides seemingly not necessarily getting along since that election and since the supposed collusion happened, I don't buy the idea that suddenly, oh yeah, this one side really likes the other one, or they were so buddy with each other, because they're not doing things that typically would be considered as friendly or improving relations. The same ones that they said Obama messed up, which, not defending him, but I don't see them as having improved. Again, objectionably, of course. I also would figure that they would have been able to indict one of his sons or Kushner for going to that meeting with that Russian woman back in June of 2016, because theoretically, if they're going to go after the top guy, Trump himself, they're going to want to start from the bottom, which is why you saw these associates going to jail. And that is kind of the flip side of the coin, where if the associates, and I really do hate this idea that people have that it's a witch hunt, because how would all these people that have worked with his campaign have gone to jail with pixie dust? They just magically found incriminating information about them. That doesn't add up effectively. But it's just this thing where people want to believe something that's not true so they can satisfy their own ego. Oh, the media and everyone is out to get Trump and blah, 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 blah. So when I watch all these different people go to jail, I know that there's some part of his campaign that's something to do with it, but I still don't believe the what a lot of the commentators are saying. Oh yeah, we're reaching the end of Trump's tenure. Mueller is coming. He's going to get him. And it's fun to go and sit there and talk to those people and pretend to be invested seriously in this idea of, yeah, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, Trump colluded with Russia. He's going to jail and we're going to put him away. But if you look at it reasonably, away from the lens of the never Trump people who, like I said, you can have your disagreements with him, but I mean, when I watched their reaction to him getting out of Syria, it was like the Twilight Zone, because these were people who complained about this war, and the other ones, and then all of a sudden, now that he's getting out and the generals are disagreeing, because of course they disagree, they want to stay in every single conflict because they know they don't have to die, and they're warmongers. They're like, oh, respect the generals. You need to stay over there. Listen to what our honorable people are saying. And that brings me to another thing, by the way, because Johnson, LBJ, was really unpopular for being in Vietnam, and obviously the soldiers that were killed over there. But it was generals who were backing him to stay over there. So literally every war you can think of that the U.S. has had a plurality of its men or its service members murdered in, the generals were right there cheering it on, saying, yeah, keep up that war, stay over there and keep fighting. And that's not to say they're all evil or horrible, but that's a running theme that I had hoped at this point people would pick up on. The other thing that's important, I'll close out since we're not getting any traffic in here, is that this probe, I think, will be more historically significant for revising people's opinions on the FBI and CIA. So, the FBI historically, they harassed MLK and were generally opposing a lot of the civil rights activists of that time period, and as well as just afterward too and before that. But now, because we're supposed to hate Trump, this agency that has a mixed record at best, a sketchy one at worst, is now being, lauded as this great provider of democracy, protecting us from the U.S. president that's trying to destroy it. And the same thing with the CIA. That's a group that throughout the democratically, think about how insane this is. You're going to trust the CIA, which threw out the democratically elected leader in Iran in 1953, to make sure that this investigation into whether or not democracy was exercised properly here was done correctly. No one sees how strange it is. We're gonna have a group that loves coups try to make sure our democracy worked. 2 years ago, or over 2 years ago at this point. No one thinks that's crazy or insane. So they're both getting this really strange kind of comeback, and they're symptomatic of what the problem has been this entire period, where you have people, and I talk to him, and I always try to say, yeah, I've got my problems with Trump, but a lot of the things I have problems with him for are things that started before him. So like when I bring up the income inequality, that was before him. All the different wars we were involved in, that was before him. I credit him with not starting anymore, which might soon not be something I can credit him with at this point. But again, we'll see what happens in Venezuela. But the bottom line is that the best way for people to get themselves out of this zone of being so against this person is to recognize that he is a symptom of a larger problem. There was a system that allowed him to get into power, but was also aided and abetted by feelings of people who were disenfranchised by his predecessors, which theoretically is how all of them get elected. They run as the opposite of the person before, then they promise to do something different. In the last couple of decades, it hasn't exactly been the case. So you get the point that this is a theme, a pattern. And it seems like people aren't able to pick up on it, or at least when they are, it's only because it's Trump and they have this hate boner for him. And, the Mueller thing with the FBI, while Mueller himself, I'm not entirely sure has done anything that I could instantly get upset about, because I haven't delved in his record. The FBI as an organization historically has done things. It's kind of like how people bring up the Democratic Party's, slavery background. It's the same thing with the FBI, where there's a background that's shady, and therefore you're trying to warn someone that, hey, the current version might not be as good as you think it is because of what it was in the past. And that's not to say that the present or past version was never able to do anything that was decent, but just think about who you're cheering on. I mean, I sit here and I watch the Democratic caucus chair, Hakeem Jeffries. He's a guy who I don't like because he was trying to spread Russiagate and all the rest of that stuff, which I know people love. But he's someone I have my problems with. But he's a person who literally stands for nothing other than just being opposed to Trump. Every time I've seen liberals cheer him on, it's because he said something that's anti-Trump. And I think when someone's in Congress, especially if they're in a position of power, their main goal should be trying to do something with that position, recognizing the responsibility you hold. Being able to say, okay, we don't agree with whoever is in the White House, so here's our series of proposals and what we plan on doing. They can have the White House for 20 or 30 years, but we're going to make sure that we try to do our agenda, and effectively legislate. And I just don't see them doing that. But it's this thing where people have been able to get a pass just for not being Trump or being seemingly against him. So it's sad. I think it might change when the investigation is over and theoretically nothing happens to Trump. Again, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I'm just taking it with a grain of salt as to it being a confirmed sure thing. There's other crimes they can get them on, like the tax evasions and whatnot, but I that's separate from this investigation. So I hope you enjoyed this. Have a good day.